Friends, this is question number 201 of the series. You have an Azure subscription. You create the following file named deploy.json. In front of you, there is a ARM template. Basically, the ARM template, if you look at the type section, they are trying to create a storage account, and then the location of the storage account is set to the location of the resource group, as they have resource group.location in it, and the name of the storage account is dynamically generated. And how they are generating it, they are using concat function. Basically, concat function is to concatenate two different variables or parameters, and the first one is copy index, then they are concatenating it with storage, and then they are concatenating it with a unique string that is generated through the ID of the resource group. Now, the copy index is basically defined at the bottom. If you see the copy section, count is defined to 3. So there will be 3 storage accounts that will be created. The loop will iterate 3 times. And the iteration starts from 0 and goes to 2. So there will be 3 storage accounts. Name of the storage account would be 0, 1, 2, and then 0 would be followed by storage, and then that will be followed by a unique string which is generated by the resource group ID. And friends, if you are not specifying the location while creating the storage account, then the default location is defined as West US. Now let's look at next part of this question. You connect to the subscription and run the following commands. The first command is new-az resource group -name rg1-location central US. And the second command is new-az resource group deployment -resource group name is rg1-template file is deploy.json. So in the first command, you are trying to create a resource group. Then in the second command, you are trying to do a deployment using the deploy.json template, which we just saw, and it's going to create the resources in the resource group rg1, which was created in the previous step. Now, for each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. And the first statement is the commands will create 4 new resources. And my friends, that's correct. There will be 1 resource group and 3 storage accounts created, as I explained earlier. Now, the next statement is the commands will create storage accounts in the West US Azure region. This is incorrect because in the template, you had defined that the location of the storage accounts would be same as the location of the resource group. So in the command, which you can see on your screen, when the resource group is created, the location of the resource group is central US. So the storage accounts will be created in central US location, not West US. And the third statement is the first storage account that is created will have a prefix of 0. You would obviously know this is correct because the template is using copy index and count is set to 3. So storage accounts will have a prefix of 0, 1, and 2. Let's head to Azure portal to try this practically and validate the answers. So friends, I am now in Azure portal. Let's try to do the deployment and see what is being created. So I have already opened Azure PowerShell. I'll copy the first command and try to run it. So the first command was new-az resource group -name -location, where name was rg1 and location was central US. And you can see it has created a resource group with the name of rg1, location is central US, and obviously the provisioning state says succeeded, and the resource group ID is shown on your screen now. Let's go to the resource groups and see whether it has got created or not. Refresh, you can see rg1 is now showing up on your screen. Now, before I go ahead and run the second command, I'll have to first upload the JSON file so that I can use it in this session. So what I'm going to do is I'll use this upload button here, and the deploy.json is already kept on my local. So I'll go ahead and upload it. So now since the upload has been done, let's now run the second command. It will take few minutes for the deployment to happen. So friends, as you can see, the command ran successfully. The deployment name is deploy. Resource group name where the resources got created is RG1. Provisioning state shows as succeeded. Timestamp is showing up here. The mode is showing up as incremental. And in the parameters, you can see location string West US was passed. Let's now try to refresh our resource group and see whether the resources got created or not. So you can see there are 3 storage accounts that have got created, and all the 3 storage accounts are using central US location. This is what confirms the location where storage accounts will be created. Now the 3 storage accounts, all the 3 storage accounts are starting with a prefix of 0, 1, and 2, and then followed by storage, and then followed by a unique string that was generated using the ID of the resource group. And you can see since all of these 3 storage accounts were deployed in the same resource group, that is why the suffix, which is the unique string that got generated, is same for all the 3 storage accounts. The only difference is they are starting with 0, 1, and 2 respectively. So this is question number 202 of the series. You need to configure a new Azure app service named Web App 1. The solution must meet the following requirements, and your requirements are Web App 1 must be able to verify a custom domain name of app.contoso.com. Web App 1 must be able to automatically scale up to 8 instances. Cost and administrative effort must be minimized. Which pricing plan should you choose, and which type of record should you use to verify the domain? So friends, this is one of the articles on Azure China website where they are comparing the different plans, different tiers of app service and their pricing and their features. So the first requirement was Web App 1 must be able to verify a custom domain name of app.contoso.com. And if I scroll down in the custom domain, you can see free tier does not support custom domain. That's why we can rule out free tier. Now let's look at the second requirement. Web App 1 must be able to automatically scale up to 8 instances. Now you can see in the maximum instances, shared again doesn't support anything in terms of scaling. So you can rule out shared as well from the pricing plan. Now the basic one supports up to 3. However, the requirement is up to 8 instances. So you can rule out basic as well and choose standard as the correct choice in case of pricing plan. And friends, the next part of the question was which type of record should you use to verify the domain? And your options are A record, 4 times A record, PTR record, and text record. Friends, in front of you is the verifying domain section of an Azure app service. And in the screenshot of the domain validation, you can see there are 2 options, CNAME and TXT. And in our case, TXT is one of the options. So TXT record type is the correct answer. But as you can see, you can also use CNAME for record validation. So this can be one of the variations of this question where you would have got CNAME in the list of options. So in that case, CNAME would be the correct answer. But in our case, at this point, TXT record is the correct answer. So friends, I hope you now understand why standard pricing plan and TXT record type are the correct answers here. But if you still have any doubts, please post them in the comment section. Question number 203. You have a Azure virtual network named VNet1 as shown in the exhibit. On the right hand side of your screen, there is an exhibit which shows the configuration of VNet1. Now the location of VNet1 is West US, resource group being used is production, subscription name is production subscription, address space is 10.2.0.0/16, DNS servers are Azure provided DNS service. No devices are connected to VNet1. You plan to peer VNet1 to another virtual network named VNet2. VNet2 has an address space of 10.2.0.0/16. You need to create the peering what should you do first? Your options are modify the address space of VNet 1, add a gateway subnet to VNet 1, create a subnet on VNet 1 and VNet 2, configure a service endpoint on VNet 2. Friends, key to answer this question is the address space of both VNet. You should already know that you can't peer two VNets with overlapping address spaces. And in this case, both the VNets being peered have same address space. So you modify the address space of VNet 1 before peering can be configured. Other option would be changing the address space of VNet 2, but that is not in the list of options. So there can be a variation in the options of this question. Question number 204. You have an Azure subscription that contains 10 virtual machines and the resources shown in the following table. Now the resources are VNet 1 and Bastion 1. VNet 1 is virtual network type. Bastion 1 is basic SKU Azure Bastion host, and the description is VNet 1 does not have any description and Bastion 1 has the description mentioning the subnet size is of subnet mask 26. You need to ensure that Bastion 1 can support 100 concurrent SSH users. The solution must minimize administrative effort. What should you do first? Your options are resize the subnet of Bastion 1, configure host scaling, create a network security group, upgrade Bastion 1 to the standard SKU. Friends, you need to make changes in Bastion configuration so it can support up to 100 concurrent SSH users. And to achieve this, you will have to upgrade it to standard SKU. Let's understand how a standard SKU will fulfill this requirement. So friends, as you would already know, in our case, the tier of the Bastion host is selected as basic. So now I'm in Azure portal and I'm trying to create a Bastion host. And if I select tier as basic, you can see the instance count is default selected as 2 and I cannot move it. It is grayed out. So you only get 2 instances to support your Bastion connectivity if you are using basic SKU. And if I go to developer, you don't even get that. You just get 1. And if I select standard, you get instance count as up to 50. You can change it to 50. As I increase the instance count towards 50, you get a warning that Azure Bastion subnet does not have sufficient IP addresses to scale out additional instances. To fix this, please delete and recreate Azure Bastion with at least subnet mask 26 or larger subnet. This is the case for me because the subnet that I have selected does not fulfill the requirement, but you would have seen in our case, the subnet is already having a subnet mask of 26. So this requirement is already met. Now, you would be wondering, our requirement is 100 concurrent SSH users, but the instance count is only going till 50. So let's now understand the second part of this question, which will help you in choosing the correct answer. So as you can see, Bastion standard SKU can support 2 to 50 instances. To learn more, see instances and host scaling. So let's go to this link and understand it in more detail. So an instance is an optimized Azure VM that is created when you configure Azure Bastion. It's fully managed by Azure and runs all of the processes needed for Azure Bastion. An instance is also referred to as a scale unit. You connect to client VMs via Azure Bastion instance. When you configure Azure Bastion using the basic SKU, 2 instances are created. This is what we saw. It was grayed out and by default it was selected 2. If you use the standard SKU, you can specify the number of instances with a minimum of 2 instances. This is called host scaling. Now comes the next part. Each instance can support 20 concurrent RDP connections and 40 concurrent SSH connections for medium workloads. So if you only have 2 instances, that means you can support up to 80 concurrent SSH connections using the basic SKU. However, our requirement is to have 100 concurrent SSH connections. That is why you'll have to upgrade Bastion to standard SKU. The number of connections per instance depends on what actions you are taking when connected to the client VM. For example, if you are doing something data intensive, it creates a larger load for the instance to process. Once the concurrent sessions are exceeded, another scale unit is required. So friends, I hope you now understand why option D has been chosen as the correct answer here. Question number 205. You have an Azure subscription that contains an Azure storage account named storage1 and the users shown in the following table. You have 3 users with the name of user 1, 2, and 3, and user 1 is member of group 1, user 2 is member of group 2, and user 3 is also member of group 1. You plan to monitor storage 1 and to configure email notifications for the signals shown in the following table. Now the signals are ingress, egress, delete storage account, and restore blob ranges. For ingress and egress, the type is metric, and for delete storage account and restore blob ranges, the type is activity log. The users to notify are: for ingress, you will notify user 1 and user 3. For egress, you need to notify user 1 only. For delete storage account, you need to modify user 1, 2, and 3. To restore blob ranges, you need to notify user 1 and user 3 only. You need to identify the minimum number of alert rules and action groups required for the planned monitoring. How many alert rules and action groups should you identify? And the first part of the question is alert rules, and your options are 1, 2, 3, and 4. Friends, you can define only one activity log signal per alert rule. And in our case, we have 4 signals, which are ingress, egress, delete storage account, and restore blob ranges. So you will create 4 alert rules. I hope you now understand why 4 has been chosen as the correct answer here. Let's look at next part, action groups. And again, you have 4 options, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Folks, look at the users to notify sections, and there are 3 different combinations of users. So you'll have to create 3 action groups. One for user 1 only, second one for user 1 and user 3 only, and another one for all 3 users. Question number 206 of the series. You have an Azure subscription that contains the vaults shown in the following table. You have 2 vaults with the name of backup 1 and recovery 1. Backup 1 is a backup vault and recovery 1 is a recovery services vault. You create a storage account that contains the resources shown in the following table. You have 2 resources with the name of cont1 and share1. Cont1 is a blob container type and share1 is a file share. To which vault can you backup cont1 and share1? Friends, let's head to Azure portal and try to create a vault in Backup Center and see what all data sources are supported by each of them, so we are better equipped to answer this question. So you can create a vault by going into the Backup Center and clicking on the plus in front of vault. You can see there are 2 options when you try to create a vault. You need to choose vault type, and the 2 options are Recovery Services Vault and Backup Vault. Now, in the Recovery Services Vault, you can see the supported data sources are Azure Virtual Machines, SQL in Azure VM, Azure Files, SAP HANA in Azure VM, Azure Backup Server, Azure Backup Agent, and DPM. When you select Backup Vault, your supported data sources are Azure Disks, Azure Blobs, Azure Database for PostgreSQL servers, Kubernetes services, Azure Database for PostgreSQL flexible servers, which are in preview at the moment. So friends, based on this information, let's go back to our slide and try to answer the questions. So cont1 here is a blob container, and you will be able to back it up to a backup vault. So therefore, the correct answer here is backup 1 only. Now, the next part of the question is share1. Share1 is a file share type, and based on the information we just saw in the Azure portal, you will be able to back it up to Recovery Services Vault only. Therefore, the correct answer is recovery 1 only. Question number 207. You create a virtual machine scale set named scale 1. Scale 1 is configured as shown in the following exhibit. So there is an exhibit on the right hand side of your screen, and we are looking at the scaling section of it. And you can see initial instance count is set to 4. That means when the virtual machine scale set is initialized, you will have 4 virtual machines to start with. Then you have scaling policies defined, and the policies are custom, and it also tells the minimum number of VMs at a time in the virtual machine scale set would be 2, and the maximum number of virtual machines at a time would be 20. Now the scale out thresholds are set as CPU threshold needs to be more than 80% for a continuous duration of 5 minutes. And when this situation happens, the number of VMs will increase by 2. And when it comes to scale in, if the CPU utilization is less than 30%, the number of VMs to decrease by is 4. And diagnostic logs is set to be disabled. Now, coming back to our question, use the drop-down menus to select the answer choice that completes each statement based on the information presented in the graphic. And your first statement is, if scale 1 is utilized at 85% for 6 minutes after it is deployed, scale 1 will be running how many virtual machines? And your options are 2, 4, 6, 10, or 20. In this case, the scale out rule will apply, and the scale out rule increases the number of VMs by 2 if the CPU threshold is 80% or higher for 5 minutes. And in this case, it has been at 85% for 6 minutes. So it will increase the VMs by 2. That means the initial instance count is 4. So scale 1 will be running at 6 virtual machines after 6 minutes. And the next part of the question is, if scale 1 is utilized at 25% for 6 minutes after it is deployed, and then utilized at 50% for 6 minutes, scale 1 will be running at, again, you have the same options of whether it's 2, 4, 6, 10, or 20 virtual machines. So as you already know, initial VM count is 4, and here scale in will kick in as the CPU utilization, which is at 25%, is less than the defined 30% for continuous 6 minutes. So scale out will try to decrease VM count by 4, but that makes it 0, and minimum number of VMs is set to 2. Therefore, it cannot reduce it below 2. So scale 1 will be running at 2 virtual machines in this case. So friends, you don't really need to memorize these type of questions. You always need to pay attention towards the scale in and scale out rules. And you also need to factor in what are the minimum number of and the maximum number of VMs defined. And then the last thing you need to understand is what is the initial instance count. Let's look at question number 208. You have an Azure subscription named subscription 1 that has the following providers registered, and the providers are authorization, automation, resources, compute, key vault, network, storage, billing, and web. Subscription 1 contains an Azure virtual machine named VM1 that has the following configurations. Private IP address is defined as a dynamic, and it is currently set to 10.0.0.4. Network security group is NSG1. Public IP address does not exist. Availability set name is AV set, and the subnet is 10.0.0.0/24. There are no managed disks, and the location is East US. You need to record all the successful and failed connection attempts to VM1. Which 3 actions should you perform? And your options are: enable Azure Network Watcher in the East US Azure region, add an Azure Network Watcher connection monitor, register the Microsoft Log Analytics provider, create an Azure storage account, register the Microsoft.Insights resource provider, enable Azure Network Watcher flow logs. And my friends, the correct answer here are option D, E, and F. You will create an Azure storage account, you will register the Microsoft.Insights resource provider, and you will enable Azure Network Watcher flow logs. So friends, if you are enjoying the content, do not forget to hit the like button and subscribe the channel. This is question number 209. You have an Azure subscription that contains the resource groups shown in the following table. You have two resource groups with the name of RG1 and RG2, and the location of RG1 is East US and the location of RG2 is West US. You create the following Azure Resource Manager template named deploy.json. Now in front of you, there is the ARM template. Let's try to understand the ARM template. In the resources section, in the types, you see Microsoft.resources/resource group. That means this template is going to create resource groups. And the location of the resource groups would be East US. And when it comes to name, they are trying to concatenate things. Basically, concatenate things is they have defined few things and they are trying to combine them to each other. Now, in the name, first thing that is getting concatenated is RG. And then they are trying to use copy index. And if you look at the bottom of the template, the count is defined to 4. That means this loop is going to iterate 4 times and iteration starts from 0. Therefore, the resources that will be created by this ARM template would be 4 resource group with the name of RG0, RG1, RG2, and RG3. Friends, I hope you now understand what is this template all about and what is going to be created when this template is executed. Let's look at next part of the question. You deploy the template by running the following command. Let new-AZ subscription deployment location is set to West US and template file is set to deploy.json. You are doing this command is doing a deployment at subscription level. Now for each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. And the first statement is the template creates a resource group named RG0 in the East US Azure region. And friends, this statement is correct. The template will create a resource group named RG0 in East US Azure region. You might be confused by West US location in the command being executed, but that is the location where metadata of the deployment is going to be stored. Let's look at statement 2. The template creates 4 new resource groups. No, this statement is incorrect. Template is written in a way that it will try to create 4 resource groups with name RG0, RG1, RG2, and RG3. But you should also see in the question, it was already mentioned that RG1 and RG2 already exists. So it will fail to create them. And the third statement is the template creates a resource group named RG3 in the West US Azure region. And my friends, this statement is incorrect. It will create a resource group named RG3, but in East US location. Let's head to Azure portal and try to deploy the template to validate the answers. Friends, we are now in Azure portal and I'm trying to mimic the situation that was given in the question. So I have already created 2 resource group with the name of RG1 and RG2. And as per the question, RG1 is using East US location and then RG2 is using West US location. So now we are going to use Azure PowerShell to deploy the ARM template that was given in the question. So what I've done, the ARM template is already saved on my local. I'll use this upload button to upload the ARM template in my session. On the right hand side, you can see the upload got completed successfully in my home drive. Now I will run the command. So it will take few minutes for the deployment to happen as it's going to iterate through the loops and then come back with the results. So let's give it few minutes. So friends, as expected, the deployment had issues and therefore the provisioning state has failed. And you can see the error message, the new-AZ deployment. The deploy failed with error showing 1 out of 1 errors. And the status message is invalid resource group location East US. The resource group already exists in location West US. Now let's head to our subscription to actually see whether how many resource groups got created. So you can see when I hit the refresh button, There are 4 resource groups now: RG0, RG1, RG2, and RG3, whereas RG1 and RG2 were already existing. So it only created RG0 and RG3, and both the resources got created in East US location. Now let's try to go at the subscription level and see what was the failure that happened, so we have a better idea on what was happening in the background. And if you are, because we were doing the deployment on the subscription level, that is why we are going and checking the deployment logs at subscription level. If the deployment was happening at a resource group level, then we would have gone in a resource group. So here you can see deployment named deploy is already there. It was just done few minutes back. It took 6 seconds and 528 milliseconds for execution. Let's click on deploy and see what actually happened. So this is the same one. And here you can see for RG3, it says got created successfully. For RG0, it says it got created successfully. Now, interestingly, it shows at RG1 a green tick, but in the status, it shows okay. What this signifies is it was matching the state of the resource group being created with the existing resources, and it found that a similar resource in similar location already exists. So it marked it as already existing. But for RG2, it gave an error because RG2 was existing in a different location, which was West US, and we were trying to create another one in the East US. This also tells you that you cannot have 2 resource groups with the same name, even though they are in different locations. But overall, we know that deployment is not going to create 4 resource groups, which is what was asked in the question. So friends, I hope this has given you clarity on why the options were chosen as the right answer. But if you still have any doubts, please post them in the comments section. This is question number 210 of the series. You plan to create the Azure web apps shown in the following table. There are 4 web apps that you are trying to create: Web App 1, Web App 2, Web App 3, and Web App 4. The runtime stack for Web App 1 is .NET 6 LTS. The runtime stack for Web App 2 is ASP.NET version 4.8. And the runtime stack for Web App 3 is PHP 8.2. And the runtime stack for Web App 4 is Python 3.11. What is the minimum number of app service plans you should create for the web apps? And your options are 1, 2, 3, and 4. You'll have to create 2 app service plans in this case. Let's again head to Azure portal to understand the reason behind choosing 2 as the correct answer. So friends, I am now in the app services section in the Azure portal. Let's try to create a web app and see what all options are supported. Now, if I try to select the runtime stack as .NET 6 LTS, which was the first web app runtime stack, you can see Windows is selected by default, but Linux operating system is also supported. Now, why we are looking at the operating system here? Because when you select any operating system, you get a app service plan. Now, if you are selecting Linux operating system, you will have to choose a Linux app plan. If you choose a Windows, you will have to choose a Windows plan. So you cannot create an app which is explicitly supported by Windows operating system and run it in a Linux plan. But for .NET 6 LTS, as you can see, both operating systems are supported, so we can use any app service plan for this case. And the second web app was ASP.NET 4.8. Let's try to choose that. When you choose ASP.NET 4.8, you can see Windows is selected by default, which is good, but Linux is grayed out. So it is not supported on Linux. Let's try to select the third runtime stack, which was PHP 8.2. So if we select PHP 8.2, by default, Linux gets selected and Windows is grayed out. So it is not supported on Windows. and the third one was Python 3.11. And just like PHP 8.2, it is also only supported on Linux. So in this case, you will have to create two plans, two app service plans. One would be a Linux plan to run PHP 8.2 and Python 3.11 web apps, and another would be a Windows plan to run ASP.NET 4.8 app. Now the remaining one was .NET 6 LTS, which is supported on both. So you could use either of the plans to run that runtime stack. Question number 211 of the series. You have an Azure subscription that contains the resources shown in the following table. You have three resources with the name of VNet1, IP1, and RT1. VNet1 is a virtual network type and is hosted in East US location. IP1 is a public IP address type and is hosted in West Europe location. RT1 is a route table type and is hosted in North Europe location. You need to create a network interface named NIC1. In which location can you create NIC1? And your options are East US and North Europe only, East US only, East US, West US, and North Europe, East US and West Europe only. And the correct answer here is option B, East US only. As always, let's look at factors which contribute to choosing this option. So friends, we are now in the network interface wizard in Azure portal. Let's try to create a network interface. Let's choose an existing resource group. And now here you can see when you are creating a network interface, virtual network is something which is mandatory out of the three resources that already exist. So this is the resource that plays a key role in choosing which option is correct. Now, if you click here, only the virtual networks in the currently selected subscription, location, and extended locations are listed. So what does it mean? That the network interface and virtual network need to be in same location. So let's try to validate this theory. So what we'll do is we'll try to create a virtual network first to mimic the scenario in the question, and then we will come back to the network interface wizard and see how it looks like. So we are now in the virtual network wizard. Let's try to create a virtual network. So here you just need to choose the resource group, and then let's give virtual network as a test VNet name. And let's choose region as Central India. So it's running a validation at the moment. Once the validation is done, we should be able to hit click, which we have done just now. It should take few seconds to do the deployment, and then we will go back in the network interface wizard to see how things are behaving. So friends, the deployment has got completed. As you can see on the right hand side of your screen, you can also see here a green tick. Let's go to resource and see the test VNet got created. In the location, you can see it was created in the Central India location. So what we'll try to do now is we will go in the network interface wizard and try to create a network interface. Let's choose our resource group, which is Cloud Shell 1407. And now by default, it has selected Southeast Asia location. And in the virtual network, you can see it's creating a new virtual network. And if I check the drop down, there is no virtual network shown here. And that's the reason we have chosen option B as the correct answer here, because VNet1 was in East US location, so you will have to create virtual network interface as well in the East US location. Let's try to validate that theory. Let's change the region to Central India. And as soon as you change the location to Central India and try to open the drop down, you can see the test VNet1 which you created earlier. This validates the theory that your network interface and virtual network need to be in the same region, and which is the reason why East US has been chosen as the right answer. Question number 212 of the series. You have an on-premise server that contains a folder named D folder 1. You need to copy the contents of D folder 1 to the public container in an Azure storage account named Contoso Data. Which command should you run? And your options are AZ storage blob copy start D folder 1 https contosodata.blob.core.windows.net/public. The second option is AZ copy sync D folder 1, then https contosodata.blob.core.windows.net/public -snapshot. Third option is AZ copy D folder 1 https contosodata.blob.core.windows.net/public -recursive. And the fourth option is AZ storage blob copy start batch D folder 1 https contosodata.blob.core.windows.net/public. And friends, the correct answer here is option C. You will have to use the recursive flag here, which indicates that the command should recursively copy all the files and folders within D folder 1 to the specified destination in the Azure storage account. Question number 213. You have an Azure app service named app1 that contains 2 running instances. You have an auto scale rule configured as shown in the following exhibit on the right-hand side of your screen. For the instance limits scale condition setting, you set maximum to 5. During a 30-minute period, app1 uses 80% of the available memory. What is the maximum number of instances for app1 during the 30-minute period? And your options are 2, 3, 4, or 5. Friends, let's first understand the auto scale rule configured. So if the trigger condition, which in this case memory, is more than 70% for 15 minutes continuously, then the instance count will increase by 1. And then there is a cooldown defined of 5 minutes. It's important to understand cooldown to get this question right. Cooldown period is the amount of time to wait after a scale operation before scaling again. So for instance, if first scale event happened after 15 minutes of 80% memory, it will wait for 5 minutes for metrics to stabilize and then scaling will happen again. Based on the condition in our question, first scaling will happen at 15 minutes and instance will increase by 1. Since the initial instance count is 2, so you will have 3 instances after 15 minutes. Now it will wait for 5 minutes before scaling again. So at 20 minutes, instance count will be 4. And then at 25, it will be 5. And then at 30, it will again try to scale, but maximum instance is set to 5. So 5 would be the correct answer here. Because it cannot scale any further and will remain at 5, no matter for how long memory utilization stays at 80%. This is question number 214. You plan to back up an Azure virtual machine named VM1. You discover that the backup pre-check status displays a status of warning. What is the possible cause of the warning status? And your options are VM1 is stopped, VM1 does not have the latest version of Azure VM agent, which is WA app agent.exe installed, VM1 has an unmanaged disk, a recovery services vault is unavailable. The possible cause of the warning status in the backup pre-check for an Azure virtual machine named VM1 can be that VM1 does not have the latest version of the Azure VM agent installed. Having an outdated or incompatible version of the Azure VM agent could lead to warnings during the backup pre-check process. It's essential to ensure that VM1 has the latest version of the Azure VM agent installed to ensure compatibility and successful backup operations. Folks, this is question number 215. You have two Azure virtual machines named VM1 and VM2 that run Windows Server. The virtual machines are in a subnet named Subnet 1. Subnet 1 is in a virtual network named VNet 1. You need to prevent VM1 from accessing VM2 on port 3389. What should you do? And your options are: create a network security group that has an outbound security rule to deny destination port 3389 and apply the NSG to the network interface of VM1. Second option is configure Azure Bastion in VNet 1. Third option is create a network security group that has an outbound security rule to deny source port 3389 and apply the NSG to subnet 1. Fourth option is create a network security group that has an inbound security rule to deny source port 3389 and apply the NSG to subnet 1. And folks, the correct answer here, which fulfills the requirement, is option A. Create a network security group that has an outbound security rule to deny destination port 3389 and apply the NSG to the network interface of VM1. However, I would never do that unless the requirement is to deny all connectivity on port 3389, as this rule will not only prevent VM1 from accessing VM2 on port 3389, but it won't be able to access any VM on port 3389 as there is no filter on destination address defined. Question number 216. You have an existing Azure subscription that contains 10 virtual machines. You need to monitor the latency between your on-premise network and the virtual machines. What should you use? Your options are service map, connection troubleshoot, connection monitor, effective routes. And friends, the correct answer here is option C, connection monitor. So friends, let's read through some of the common use cases of connection monitor, as you should be prepared if you get some variations of this question in the exam. Your front-end web server virtual machine or virtual machine scale set communicates with a database server VM in a multi-tier application. You want to check network connectivity between the two VMs or scale set. The second use case is you want VMs scale sets in, for example, the East US region to ping VM scale sets in Central US region, and you want to compare cross-region network latencies. You have multiple on-premise office sites, one in Seattle, Washington, for example, and another in Ashburn, Virginia. Your office sites connect to Microsoft 365 URLs. For your users of Microsoft 365 URLs, you want to compare the latencies between Seattle and Ashburn. Your hybrid application needs connectivity to an Azure storage account endpoint. Your on-premise site and your Azure application connect to the same endpoint. You want to compare the latencies of the on-premise sites with the latencies of the Azure application. You want to check the connectivity between your on-premise setups and the Azure VM's virtual machine scale sets that host your cloud application. You want to check the connectivity from single or multiple instances of an Azure virtual machine scale set to your Azure or non-Azure multi-tier application. So friends, I hope you now understand some of the common use cases of connection monitor and would be able to resolve questions if you get any new questions based on the use cases of connection monitor. Let's now understand how you create a connection monitor. In connection monitors that you create in connection monitor, you can add both on-premise machines and Azure VMs scale sets as sources. This is what we already know, as in our case, we are using the connection monitor to monitor the latency between the on-premise network and virtual machines that are hosted in Azure. These connection monitors can also monitor connectivity to endpoints. The endpoints can be on an Azure or any other URL or IP address. Connection monitor includes the following entities. The first one is connection monitor resource, a region-specific Azure resource. All the following entities are properties of a connection monitor resource. Then it has an endpoint, a source or destination that participates in connectivity checks. Examples of endpoints include Azure VM, scale sets, or on-premise agents, URLs, and IP addresses. Test configuration. A protocol is specific configuration for a test. Based on the protocol you select, you can define the port, thresholds, test frequency, and other properties. Test group, the group that contains source endpoints, destination endpoints, and test configurations. A connection monitor can contain more than one test group. And then finally, test, the combination of a source endpoint, destination endpoint, and test configuration. A test is the most granular level at which monitoring data is available. The monitoring data includes the percentage of checks that failed and the round trip time, which is RTT. Question number 217. You have an Azure subscription. The subscription contains virtual machines that connect to a virtual network named VNet1. You plan to configure Azure Monitor for VM Insights. You need to ensure that all the virtual machines only communicate with Azure Monitor through VNet1. What should you create first? Your options are a data collection rule, a log analytics workspace, an Azure Monitor private link scope, which is AMPLS, a private endpoint. And folks, the correct answer here is option C, an Azure Monitor private link scope. With Azure Private Link, you can securely link Azure Platform as a Service resources to your virtual network by using private endpoints. Azure Monitor is a constellation of different interconnected services that work together to monitor your workloads. An Azure Monitor Private Link connects a private endpoint to a set of Azure Monitor resources to define the boundaries of your monitoring network. That set is called as Azure Monitor Private Link Scope, which is AMPLS. I hope you now understand why AMPLS has been chosen as the correct answer here. With private link, you can connect privately to Azure Monitor without opening up any public network access. Ensure your monitoring data is only accessed through authorized private networks. Prevent data exfiltration from your private networks by defining specific Azure Monitor resources that connect through your private endpoints. Securely connect your private on-premise network to Azure Monitor by using Azure Express Route and Private Link. Keep all traffic inside the Azure backbone network. So friends, these are all the questions that I wanted to cover in this part of the series, but there will be more parts released soon. So stay tuned. And if you have liked the content, do not forget to hit the like button and subscribe the channel.